but he continued to use the office of the presidency and his voice to promote the big lie. And he knew his followers would believe it. He knew he could convince his loyal followers to believe that this was a rigged election, a stolen election. Again, compromising our democracy where the will of the people determine who our leaders are. And he knew his followers would be motivated to action because he knew he can motivate his followers. He put himself before the nation, before his responsibilities as President of the United States. He put his own self-interest above his responsibilities under the Constitution of the United States and to the people of this nation. And then he summoned his loyal following to Washington on January 6th. He knew they would come. He knew dangerous people were in the group. He knew the Proud Boys were there, which he had directly said, stand back and stand by. He knew that they were ready for violent action. And then he incited the mob to action on January 6th. We know the words that he used. We saw the videos. It's part of the record of the impeachment trial. We will never surrender. We will never concede. We will stop the steal, stolen election. All words that he had been using during the entire 2020 election cycle, particularly when he thought he was going to lose. But the most damning part of the president's violation of his oath of office, the most serious part, is what he did and did not do after seeing the violence erupt in the United States Capitol, after the Capitol was penetrated, after we saw the violence being committed, where we knew that the members of Congress were in danger. The Vice President of the United States was in danger. The people that work here were in danger. The people, the press, all the people that are in the Capitol legitimately were at danger. We all saw that. And the President of the United States knew of that. And he did nothing to stop the violence. He could have called off his loyalist and told them to get out of the Capitol. He didn't do that. He could have sent in the National Guard in order to protect us. He didn't do that. And he never condemned the participants in this mob in penetrating the Capitol for what they did. I'm going to sort of summarize my feeling about that by agreeing with Representative Liz Cheney, the House Republican Conference Chair, who said on the floor of the House, and let me just quote her statement, "The President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled this mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the President. The President could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. There has never been a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution." I agree with that. President Trump violated his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. He violated that. But let's take a look at what he did do after knowing the violence that occurred. His tweet of 2:24 p.m. Now, this is after the Vice President had been removed from presiding in the chamber, after he knew the violence that was taking place in the Capitol of the United States. He was aware of all that. He knew that we had shut down the operations of the House and the Senate, that there was violence taking place within the Capitol, and that his vice president was the target of that attack. And when he tweeted at 2:24 p.m., Mike Pence, I'm quoting the president, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what he should have been done to protect our country, inflaming the group even more to violence after he knew that it was a violent circumstance. He had known violence had taken place, and we heard, put into the record of the impeachment trial today, Congresswoman Butler's report of Majority Leader McCarthy's conversation, which again is during this period of time. Here we are. The Republican leader in the House of Representatives gets the president on the phone. He says, Mr. President, we're being attacked. My office is being broken into. We need help. Send the guard. Take care of us. And then President Trump said something like, well, it's not my supporters, it's some left-wing group. And Leader McCarthy said, no, Mr. President, these are your supporters who are doing this. And what did the leader say? What did the president say? I guess, Kevin, these people are more upset about the election than you are. Here we have the members of Congress in harm's way, and the president is talking about the support for those who are causing the violence, putting his own interest above the safety of the people that he has sworn to protect as our commander-in-chief. And then at the end of the day, about 6 o'clock, he sends out a tweet that really sums up his feelings about what these people were doing. Now, these are people that came into the Capitol, they killed people, they hurt people, they stole property, they damaged property, they invaded the Capitol of the United States, they hurt law enforcement officers, they hurt all of us, they hurt our democracy. So how does the president sum up today? His tweet? These are the things that happen when a sacred landslide victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. Repeating the big lie, saying the day was a day of celebration when it was one of the most bleak days, dark days in the history of our nation. That's what President Trump did, rather than bringing in the National Guard, rather than telling his people to go home, rather than being concerned about the safety of the Vice President or the members of Congress, as the President of the United States should have been doing. He violated his oath of office over and over and over again, pattern of practice that we've seen for so long. It clearly establishes that he incited an insurrection against our country, that the facts included as basis for the articles of impeachment brought to us by the House of Representatives has been proven. The purpose of impeachment is not just the account
Early on the morning of November 4th, as the ballots continued to be counted, President Trump claimed victory and asserted that Democrats were trying to steal the election. On November 8th, the day after several media outlets had declared Joe Biden the apparent winner based on state-by-state results, President Trump tweeted, "This was a stolen election." With that, Mr. President, his post-election campaign to change the outcome began. Over the ensuing days and months, the president distorted the results of the election, continuing to claim that he had won, while court after court threw out his lawsuits and states continued to certify their results. President Trump's falsehoods convinced a large number of Americans that he had won and that they were being cheated. The president also embarked on an incredible effort to pressure state election officials to change the results in their states. The most egregious example occurred on January 2nd. In an extraordinary phone call, President Trump could be heard alternating between lobbying, cajoling, intimidating, and threatening the election officials in Georgia. "I just want to find 11,780 votes," he stated, seeking the exact number of votes needed to change the outcome in that state. Despite the president's pleas and threats, the Georgian officials refused to yield to the presidential pressure, as did state officials in other states. In December, President Trump's post-election campaign became focused on January 6th, the day that Congress was scheduled to count the Electoral College votes. Although this counting is a ceremonial and administrative act, it is nevertheless the constitutionally mandated final step in the Electoral College, in the electoral process, and it must occur before a new president can be inaugurated. On December 19th, President Trump tweeted to his supporters, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild." In response, some of his campaign supporters changed the date for protest rallies they originally had scheduled to occur after the inauguration to happen instead on January 6th. Having failed to persuade the courts and state election officials, President Trump next began to pressure Vice President Pence to use his role under the 12th Amendment to overturn the election. The president met with Vice President Pence on January 6th, then increased the pressure by tweeting hours later, "If the vice president comes through for us, we will win the presidency." That's what his tweet said. Vice President Pence, however, refused to yield. He issued a public letter on January 6th, making clear that his oath to support and defend the Constitution would prevent him from unilaterally deciding which electoral votes should be counted and which should not. During his speech at the Ellipse on January 6, President Trump kept up that drumbeat of pressure on Vice President Pence. In front of a large, agitated crowd, he urged the Vice President to stand up for the good of our Constitution. I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do, President Trump concluded. Mr. President, rather than facilitating the peaceful transfer of power, President Trump was telling Vice President Pence to ignore the Constitution and to refuse to count the certified votes. He was also further agitating the crowd, directing them to march to the Capitol. In this situation, context was everything. Tossing a lit match into a pile of dry leaves is very different from tossing it into a pool of water. And on January 6th, the atmosphere among the crowd outside the White House was highly combustible, largely the result of an ill wind blowing from Washington for the past 2 months. President Trump had stoked discontent with a steady barrage of false claims that the election had been stolen from him. The allegedly responsible officials were denigrated, scorned, and ridiculed by the president, with the predictable result that his supporters viewed any official that they perceived to be an obstacle to President Trump's reelection as an enemy of their cause. That set the stage for the storming of the Capitol for the first time in more than 200 years. Nearly 30 minutes after the Capitol first came under attack, members of Congress, law enforcement, and everyone else here in the Capitol waited in vain for the president to unequivocally condemn the violence and tell his misguided supporters to leave the Capitol. Rather than demand an end to the violence, President Trump expressed his frustration once again that the vice president had not stopped the vote certification as he had urged. Shortly after the vice president was whisked away from this very chamber to avoid the menacing mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," President Trump tweeted, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done." Instead of preventing a dangerous situation, President Trump created one. And rather than defend the constitutional transfer of power, he incited an insurrection with the purpose of preventing that transfer of power from occurring. Whether by design or by virtue of a reckless disregard for the consequences of his action, President Trump, subordinating the interests of the country to his own selfish interests, bears significant responsibility for the invasion of the Capitol. Mr. President, this impeachment trial is not about any single word uttered by President Trump on January 6, 2021. It is instead about President Trump's failure to obey the oath he swore on January 20th, 2017. His actions to interfere with the peaceful transition of power, the hallmark of our Constitution and our American democracy, were an abuse of power and constitute grounds for conviction. Two arguments have been made against conviction that deserve comment. The first is that this was a snap impeachment, that the House failed to hold hearings, conduct an investigation, and interview witnesses. And that is true. Without a doubt, the House should have been more thorough. It should have compiled a more complete record. Nevertheless, the record is clear that the President Trump, abused his power, violated his oath to uphold the Constitution, and tried almost every means in his power to prevent the peaceful transfer of authority to the newly elected president. Second is the contention that the First Amendment protects the president's right to make any sort of outrageous and false claims, no matter the consequences. But, Madam President, the First Amendment was not designed and has never been construed by any court to bar the impeachment and conviction of an official who violates his oath of office by summoning and inciting a mob to threaten other officials in the discharge of their constitutional obligations. My vote in this trial stems from my own oath and duty to defend the Constitution of the United States. The abuse of power and betrayal of his oath by President Trump meet the constitutional standard of high crimes and misdemeanors. And for those reasons, I voted to convict Donald J. Trump. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. President,
Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Now I ask unanimous consent that the Secretary be authorized to include statements of senators explaining their votes either given or submitted during the legislative sessions of the Senate through March 1st, along with the full record of the Senate's proceedings and the filings by the parties in a Senate document printed under the supervision of the Secretary of the Senate that will complete the documentation of the Senate's handling of these impeachment proceedings.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of Senate Res. 62 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 62, congratulating the Tampa.
61.
Senate Resolution 61, honoring the life, achievements, and legacy of the Honorable George Pratt Schultz.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to...
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
Pardon-moi. I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent, Madam President, that the Senate proceed to the consideration of Senate Res. 62 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 62, congratulating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the loyal fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for becoming Super Bowl 55 champions.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro tem, and the majority and minority leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conferences authorized by law by concurrent action of the two houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that on Friday, February 19th, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., committees be authorized to report legislative and executive matters.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that at time determined on Tuesday, February 23rd, notwithstanding Rule 22, the Senate proceed to executive session and the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Thomas J. Vilsack to be Secretary of Agriculture. Further, that there be 20 minutes for debate equally divided between the two leaders or the designees, and that the Senate vote without intervening action or debate on the nomination, and that if confirmed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 10.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
I send a cloture motion.
Clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of State, Linda Thomas Greenfield of Louisiana to be the representative of the United States of America to the United Nations and the representatives of the United States of America in the Security Council of the United Nations.
I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the standing rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on calendar number 10, Linda Thomas Greenfield of Louisiana to be the representative of the United States of America to the United Nations with the rank and status of the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and the representative of the United States of America in the Security Council of the United Nations, signed by 18 senators as follows.
I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
I now move to proceed to legislative session.
Question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion's agreed to.
I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 11.
Question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
A nomination, Department of State, Linda Thomas Greenfield of Louisiana to be representative of the United States of America to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Where am I? I lost. Motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on calendar number 11, Linda Thomas Greenfield of Louisiana, to be representative of the United States of America to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations, signed by 18 senators as follows.
I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that following the reading of Washington's farewell address on Monday, Feb. 22, the Senate resume consideration of calendar number 10, that the cloture motions ripen at 5:30 on Monday, February 22nd, and finally that the mandatory quorum calls for the cloture motions filed today, February 13th, be waived.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, that it adjourn to then convene for pro forma sessions only, with no business being conducted on the following dates and times, that the following each pro forma session, the Senate adjourn until the next pro forma session, Tuesday, February 16th at 10 a.m., Friday, February 19th at 10:15 a.m. I further ask that when the Senate adjourns on Friday, February 19th, it next convene at 3 p.m. Monday, February 22nd. Further, that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and Senator Portman be recognized to deliver Washington's farewell address as it provided under the previous order, and that following his remarks, morning business be closed, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the Thomas Greenfield nomination as provided under the previous order.
Without objection.
If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until February 16th at 10 a.m.